Hello, and welcome to your Craftbox episode on cinematic technique in George Orwell's 1984. So, one of the things that we know about 1984 is the power of the telescreen, the power of the 2 minutes of hate in order to brainwash the citizenry. And I would argue that this is really one of the first novelist who has a full understanding of how we get kind of sucked into movies and films. And he saw that happen in his lifetime, and he used it to create the 2 minutes of hate. But more subtly, it also inspired him to write in a way that feels kind of cinematic to me in terms of how we get voices and zoom in moments, and we pan quickly back and forth across multiple scenes. So we're going to take a look at one particular scene in part 7 or chapter 7 of part 1, where Winston remembers a moment when he was walking along and he thought that he came across a riot, but in fact he was just coming across proles having a sort of scuffle around saucepans, and how they thought they were being cheated out of saucepans. So, like, that's the stuff you cook with. That's the exact same thing. So we're going to take a look at how he describes this in a way that feels cinematic. We're going to start here at the bottom of the page. He remembered how once he had been walking down a crowded street when a tremendous shout of hundreds of voices, women's voices, had burst from a side street a little way ahead. It was a great, formidable cry of anger and despair. A deep "oh" that went humming on like the reverberation of a bell. So this is a great moment because you get the scene where he's walking in a crowded space and you take in information the way that he takes information in, that he hears it from outside of the scene's scope, of the camera's scope, and his attention is drawn to it, and that it was it kind of reverberated so much that it was sort of like a bell. So he continues. His heart had leapt. It started, he thought. A riot. The proles are breaking loose at last. When he reached the spot, it was to see a mob of 200 or 300 women crowding around the stalls of a street market. So he starts us off with this big long shot where we see like the whole market and all the women. And he's going to begin to zoom in. With faces as tragic as though they had been doomed passengers on a sinking ship. So we get these zoom-in moments of their faces in complete despair that something horrible has happened, that it means the end of everything. But at this moment, the general despair broke down into a multitude of individual quarrels. And so at this point he realizes, oh, it's not one big riot, it's a couple of people. So a couple of people, and each of them are having their own individual sort of quarrel or scuffle. So he's going to begin to move in on specific individuals. It appeared that one of the stalls had been selling tin saucepans. They were wretched, flimsy things, but cooking pots of any kind were always difficult to get. Now the supply had unexpectedly given out. The successful women, bumped and jostled by the rest, were trying to make off with their saucepans, while dozens of others clamored around the stall, accusing the stall keeper of favoritism and of having more saucepans somewhere in reserve. So that super long sentence with multiple verbs going on: clamored, bumped, jostled, accusing. All of this happens in one sentence, and it really shows us the kind of chaotic nature of the scene. If you're ever going to have a super long sentence, you want to have it in a scene like this where so many things are happening at once. And then he begins a short sentence. There was a fresh outburst of yells, and that short sentence draws our attention and zooms us in to two women that he's going to begin to describe. Two bloated women, one of them with her hair coming down, had got hold of the same saucepan and were trying to tear it out of one another's hands. For a moment they were both tugging, and then the handle came off. Winston watched them disgustedly. All right, so you see us zooming in, the chaos of it, and then boom, the handle breaks, and that one particular moment has ended. So you really get the sense of how he came across this riot, first by sound, then he sort of processes through looking at the big scene and the smaller scene exactly what's caused the quote riot, though it's not a riot, it's just sort of a series of arguments. And then he really begins to zoom in after he has this run-on sentence with all these verbs on two particular women and how foolish they are for arguing about something. He was hoping that they, of course, were arguing about Big Brother, about the party, that they were rising up to take power back from the government, but in fact, they were just arguing over cooking utensils. But the way it's written, the takeaway for us is really how cinematic it appears. And so try to order your details in this way as a person might encounter them, first by sound, then by sight, then a lot of chaos, then zooming in on particular faces, zooming back out, zooming in. Think about that as you write, because it's really that kind of visual moving back and forth between close-ups and long range that gives Orwell's writing, especially writing about intense moments like this, so much power. So good luck with your imitations and understanding of Orwell, and we'll see you next time.